Hello, everybody. Today, my name is Ahmad. I'm here with attorney Kevin O'Brien. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing incredible, especially because I get to interview you. We had an interesting conversation over the phone. You've been a trial attorney for over a decade now. It's been quite a while. Tell us about that. Like, how's that?
Well, it's always what I wanted to do as far as being an attorney. I don't know exactly why. I just kind of I knew I wanted to do criminal defense. I kind of like being the underdog. I'm very distrustful of the government, always have been, probably even more so now. Frankly, I just felt like the stakes were so high. I feel like people's life and their liberty is so important that there's really nothing else like it. Maybe the exception of being like a surgeon or something in an emergency situation. I can't imagine having more responsibility, pressure on you. And I seem to enjoy that, although I don't know if I could do it forever at the level that I'm doing it at now, because it does take something out of you. Each and every one of them do, regardless of the seriousness or, the complexities of the case. And it seems to be getting harder, frankly, as I get older.
And how does that it gets tougher as you get older? Could you explain that a bit? Like, what do you mean?
Well, I think when I was young, all I really wanted to do was get a chance. And I wanted people to be able to trust me because I believed in what I was doing and how I would go about doing it. But nobody wants a really young, inexperienced attorney. And so you have to prove yourself. So a lot of it, and I don't think I should necessarily be like that, but a lot of it was personal for me in the sense that I needed to prove myself to people so that I could do that high level stuff, and ran into a few issues, that young attorneys run into. One, clients not wanting you to do it. And two, making it a little bit too much about myself rather than the client. And also, I would say three, looking at what other attorneys do and I guess trying to emulate it or do something for the approval of judges or prosecutors or even other attorneys who were sitting in the room. And it's really not about that. As soon as I let that go, I can tell you a specific story, but as soon as I let that go, I became the attorney that I am today, which, I don't like to brag, but I think there's very few people who can do what I do and how I do it in the courtroom in a trial setting.
And how did you make that switch? I mean, you made that switch. How did that whole incident go about where you switched from caring a bunch of what, the other attorneys thought? That's what you're kind of saying, right? Like you're having to prove yourself. What was the story behind that switch?
Sure. Well, I was a prosecutor for a few years because I wanted to get comfortable being in a courtroom and trying cases and understanding what that process was like. And it was great. I love the people I worked with in the office, but I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to defend people. And when I left that office, felt pretty comfortable and pretty confident that I was a good trial attorney. And the fact of the matter was I wasn't. Being a prosecutor, with all due respect to them, there's certain difficulties in the job, but it's completely different. And I would, at least for me, it was a lot easier. I don't think I lost a felony trial as a prosecutor ever, and didn't seem the challenge that I needed. But when I got out and I was defending people, real live people, which is always something that I try to remember myself. It's not a case, it's not a game, but they're real people with real consequences, regardless of the case. I started trying cases and I would get compliments from judges, from prosecutors, from people sitting in the courtroom, and they would say, you did a real good job, Kevin. And I would say, okay. And I guess it felt good, but I was losing those cases. I think when I started off as a defense attorney, I may have lost, I don't know the exact number, although they all stay with me, but probably 3, 4, 5 cases in a row, something like that. And I heard some people talking and saying nice things about me, but I was like, it's not nice for my clients. They're sitting in jail, they're getting fines, they're getting probation, whatever they may be getting. And I said, well, if and of course I didn't look inward and say, oh, it could be me. I said, no, these things are impossible to win. The government always wins. But I said, I'm not doing these the way that I want to do them. And at that point, I started asking the questions and doing the opening statements and picking the jury and, doing the cross examinations the way that I wanted to do it, the way that was more interesting to me. It's strange. I guess it just tells people to trust themselves if they believe in themselves. But at that point, I think I rattled off, I don't know, 19 or 20 consecutive not guilty verdicts after losing, those 3, 4, or 5, whatever it was. A strange switch, though, Ahmad, because the judges and prosecutors who were telling me I was doing a good job when I was losing started telling me I was getting lucky when I was winning. And I
Yeah.
think I believed them to a certain extent, but now now they admire it, and now they'll compliment it and they'll refer people to me and stuff, and that's very nice. It's flattering, but it's the same stuff. It wasn't lucky then, it's not lucky now. It's a skill, it's a belief, and jurors want to hear from real people. I don't really talk like a lawyer as much as I can help it. Frankly, I don't like most attorneys, and I try to talk to them in a way that would be interesting to me, or interesting to my mother or my wife or whoever I'm talking to on a regular basis, or even my kids. I talk to my kids about cases. Hey, what do you think about this question? Or what do you think about this type of case? What would you be thinking of as a juror? I get the best input from people who aren't attorneys, because those are the people that are more likely than not to be my jurors.
That's extremely interesting. Wow. We could go deeper into that, but I want to go back to one question I was really thinking of is like, how do you deal with it emotionally? Like you talk about, like the outcome of what you're doing determines whether or not this guy spends, time in jail or, has probation or, these severe consequences to his life. Like, how do you deal with it emotionally?
I think that's what gets harder and harder as I get older. Probably makes sense. There's certain cases I won as a young man. I'm not sure that I could win again now, but there's also cases that I lost as a young man that I think I'd probably win now. So what happens though is it became less about me and more about my clients. And because I knew what I was doing, I knew that I could be successful, but I have to go into every trial thinking about the worst case scenario. You have to focus on the negative. And I just finished a trial in January. It went about 6 or 7 days, and you're sitting with those clients, and strangely, I end up really becoming fond of most of my clients. Certainly not all of them, but most of them. And the toughest part of the case is there's two tough parts. One is preparing and making sure that they understand the risk that they're taking by not accepting a plea deal, which, oftentimes can be enticing. Frequently they're punished if they go to trial, and most judges won't acknowledge that, but they are. And then standing next to somebody you've become fond of, once you get the note from the jury that says we have a verdict. I mean, I don't know how the defendants do it, because my heart and my stomach drop every single time, because even the most recent one, the guy was probably, I don't want to give away too much, but he was probably in his mid 50s. Realistically, he was going to spend the rest of his life and die in state prison if he lost. And the other side of that was, if we walked in and we heard the jury say the verdict not guilty, he was going to walk out with his family and go home and go back to his job and, just be a normal person where the system worked for him. That's fortunately what happened there, but that pressure, that responsibility gets more and more. And I'm not done yet, but I won't do it if I can't give it absolutely everything I have, or if I feel like there's a drop off in some way. It's entirely too important to the people I represent. I think I'm a smart enough guy that I could figure out something else to do if I can't give it absolutely everything I have. So for me, it just takes a piece out of you each time, and you learn from it, but it also takes something away from you that I think eventually will put me in a position where with my standards, will not be okay doing it. And it's even for me, and it's fortunate, we get pretty good deals because of myself and my partner, who's an excellent trial attorney as well, Adam Eggleston. But there were years when I was working at a firm prior to working for myself where I was doing almost all of their trials, and I think 20 or so in a year. And that's, not only is it incredibly mentally taxing, it becomes physically taxing, because you don't sleep the same, you don't eat the same, you just can't do the same things that you do in everyday or normal life. And I frequently get home from trials, tell my wife Sarah, I say, I'm never going to do that again. And she's like, yes, you will. And she's right. But I know that there'll be an end time at some point, and I try to help people with whatever input I can to make better trial attorneys out there. I think there are young people, which, we talked on the phone before. I think that it's really scary going to your trial with that responsibility, but we need people who are willing to have the courage to go, and basically you walk into a courtroom and everybody in that courtroom, other than you, your client, and maybe his family, if they're there, his or her family, I should say, think that they're guilty. The judge, most of the time, thinks your client's guilty. The prosecutor certainly does. And frankly, when you walk in, most of the jurors, the court officers, and any spectators think that they're guilty. And it's a lonely feeling, because it's just you and them but you have to have the courage, because without it, the police work gets worse. The punishments aren't examined as well. It's an insane system that we have. It's beautiful in the sense that it's better than trusting the government to handle the case and make a decision on guilt or innocence. I like the fact that we have citizens, but picking a jury is the most important part of it, and I feel like nobody focuses on that, or not nobody, but most people.
That was, I agree with you on everything that you're saying. There's not a single thing I don't agree with. You talked about mistrusting the government, like you not trusting the government. Like, how was your upbringing? I don't know if your upbringing had anything to do with not trusting the government, but like, what's the reasoning behind that? Because I don't either.
Well, my mistrust of the government or distrust of the government has only expanded as I've gotten older. I think I was always distrustful of the government and their organizations and things like that. And it probably started off, my dad was kind of a wild guy who would do some shady stuff here and there, but was fun to be around, and he always figured his way around it and always kind of seemed to be able to talk to anybody or anything like that. So I have to give him a lot of credit for how I deal with juries with him. But school, which is probably one of the ultimate governmental organizations, it sucks, and it's only getting worse. And they treated me poor, or a lot of teachers. I shouldn't say, there are some exceptional teachers out there, and I always feel bad when I rally against schools, because there are some exceptional teachers that I still think about to this day often. But most of them suck. They treated me poorly because I was a kid who liked to goof around and liked to make people laugh and didn't have any interest in sitting down and shutting up and just doing what the teacher said and giving them the right answers that they wanted. I wanted to be able to think. I wanted to be able to move. I wanted to be able to mess around and make my friends laugh, do different things. And I understand there has to be some structure, but I also knew, again, not to toot my own horn, but I was very good academically. They would mark me down or put worse grades down than maybe some of my contemporaries, because I was a wise ass, or because I was goofing around, or because, I didn't just go with their narrative. I might ask why, or I might think a little bit. And, it only expanded from there, because it continued. And you look at different things that the state government does, that the county government does, that the US government does. And you're like, man, that is not for me. That is not for the people. That is for money. That is for, people with more power than me, with, who are paying people off or doing things. I mean, there's been a million examples, even in the last few years, which, regardless of what side of the issues you land on, that they're not doing it for the best interest of the people that they are claiming to protect and be serving. It just seems to me that the bigger the government gets, the less they serve the people. And so me, in my little world, I'm like, this is my way that I'm most skilled to take them on and push back against, corruption or bad police work. And again, I have friends who are police. I'm not anti-police, but when they do a bad job, they shouldn't get convictions. And people always ask me, well, what about if your client is guilty and you get him acquitted or her acquitted? Good, I said, I go home, I sleep like a baby, I enjoy myself, and I have a nice night with my family. And I explain, it's not because I want people who are culpable or guilty of something that actually hurts somebody to be just free. But if the government, with all its resources, I don't care if it's Albany County or any county in New York State, which is where I practice, if they can't convict my client with all of their resources, with cooperating police officers, cooperating witnesses, all of those things, then they didn't do a good enough job. And I don't feel one bit of remorse about not guilties. I actually would hope that they would learn from it, but instead they think you're a silver-tongued lawyer and you just figured it out or something like that. No, they did it. They did a bad job. I had a trial this fall. I think it was in September, October. It might have even been in August. But I walked out, and the lead investigator, it was a not guilty verdict, but the lead investigator said to me, he goes, "Oh, real nice job, counselor. You got that guy off." And it was a pretty serious case. It was a sex case. I was like, I did it. I did that. I was like, you were the lead investigator. I was like, do a better job next time. You've got victims here, allegedly. You didn't even bother to talk to some of the witnesses on this case because you didn't really do your job. You thought it was going to be easy. You thought you'd get a plea. You thought you'd do all this. And then, unfortunately for you, they hired me, and my client had the courage to go to trial, and we pretty much eviscerated them. I don't know whether the guy was guilty or not. He very well may have been, but I don't feel even remotely bad for doing what I do. I have an obligation, and that's the one easy thing about my job. I serve my client, and as long as ethically I can do that, or as long as I'm not going outside the bounds of ethics, I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. I don't have to worry about anybody electing me. I don't have to worry about anybody making donations to my campaign. I don't have to worry about financing or anything like that. I have to worry about, am I serving my client? And if I do that, I sleep like a baby.
That's right. I think that's a good note to end off on. And thank you for being passionate, powerful, and like you're amazing. I do a lot of these interviews. This is my favorite one that I've done so far, and I want to tell you thank you for your time.
I really appreciate it. Send me a copy of it when you put it out, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I would. Oh, you got to end off the interview. This is still being recorded. You got to.
Sorry. Oh, well, I appreciate you speaking with me. I enjoyed the conversation. I feel like I talked a lot, but you let me talk, and these are things I am passionate about. So any opportunity I get to talk about my cases and frankly criminal defense, I'm willing to do, because there's a lot of room to improve, and I hope we do, because there are real live people that get really crushed by the system sometimes. And a lot of people don't seem to care.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, if I'm in New York, where can I find you? Like if I'm in New York and because if I was in New York and I had some crime that they were accusing me of, you're the first guy I'd call. Where can they find you?
Well, I'm at my firm, O'Brien and Eggleston. Our website is o'brieneneggleton.com, I believe. I'm not sure. It's something like that. But if you Google O'Brien and Eggleston, I'm certain you'll find us. Again, my name's Kevin O'Brien, and I'm not hard to find. All of my clients end up getting my cell phone. I call, text, whatever, because I think that's important too. A lot of attorneys don't communicate with their clients. And I always want to make sure that I'm tailoring their case to their specific goals, because if it's not a good result for them, who cares if it's a good result for me?
I agree with that too. Okay. So yeah, oe-legaldefense.com. You can find them online. Also get a free consultation, 518-241-5549. Again, thank you so much for your time. You have a good one.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.